Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at parents who are narcissists and water signs. In case you don't know, I have already done a series on narcissists in general, just talking about adults who are narcissists. And at first I did what I did here and I broke it down into elements. And then I just said, wow, this is fun. And plus there are nuances between each of the signs within one element that I wanted to explore further. So I actually have the different elements, plus I have separate videos for each of the signs and how narcissism may express itself through each sign. I really should link those videos below, and I probably will do so pretty soon. But anyway, I just wanted to do a separate video on parents being narcissists to their children and how that plays out specifically with that dynamic. And just to review, the water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. The water element is connected to the emotions. You can say it's the intuition, the spiritual, it's creative, it's very nurturing. But when we're talking about narcissism, I just want to clarify it a little bit, not talking about what some psychologists would say, as I am not in that profession, but my definition of narcissism is when someone is deliberately being mean to generate negative energy that they feed upon. Now that's the malignant narcissist. But there's also the covert narcissist, the person who is always the martyr, the victim, the person who is, always giving of themselves, and they're never getting love in return. They're always unloved, and they have been forever, and they mention this all the time to generate sympathy. And the covert narcissist is the one type of narc that I feel the water signs can specialize in out of all the elements. So I'm going to be talking about the covert narc in particular. In terms of the malicious narcissist, I don't necessarily think that this is going to be directly connected to the water element. I do think narcissism can certainly be with water signs. When we're talking about relationships, the water signs are some of the, I was going to say the usual suspects, but what the water signs are all about can be directly connected to narcissism and what their goal is. And I'll flesh that out a little bit as I, start this talk on this. But I just wanted to kind of give an intro because I think that for me, I'm not just looking at some kind of psychological definition of it. I do think narcissism is on a spectrum, and the people that we meet who just talk incessantly about themselves, they might annoy you, but they may not be malicious, nor may they be unintentionally problematic in your life. They might be, they could be annoying and you're like, oh God, this person's coming towards me and I know that they're going to talk my head off. And you just kind of, turn around another corner or something because you don't want to be caught up in that. But it's not really what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the serious problematic people in our lives. And parents, but we're talking specifically here about parents and children. The reason this can be so problematic is because we typically are under our parents' care for 18 years. until we are legal adults, at least in the United States. That's the law. So it's almost like getting brainwashed because, when you're young, you're very malleable. You're totally impressionable. You're somebody that is believing, trusting the adults around you, be they your caretakers or other important adults in your life, and then, or authority figures, and then, you're not realizing that they can manipulate. And the water signs do this. They actually specialize in manipulation. And some narcissists are doing this. Well, narcissists want control. And so you will see with water sign parents, as the child gets older and is more independent, this is when they can try to thwart their independence. How do they do that? They can subtly or not so subtly kind of say things to chip away at their sense of self-esteem so that they doubt themselves, so that they put the narcissistic parent as the person who can, either bestow them confidence or chip away at it, but they may question whether or not they have competence. They may try to use their authority to keep their children from doing things that are age appropriate, when they get older, like not letting them go on some kind of maybe it's like a field trip and it will be overnight, or it's some kind of place where they would have to stay for extended time with other adults. Now, I'm not talking about a responsible parent who questions the adults in charge. That's a totally different topic, but I'm talking about just the idea of other people having access to their child and being able to influence their child could threaten such a parent who feels, narcissists feel powerless. And this is why they do what they do, whether they're doing the most evil thing, which is, really tormenting people, maybe, God forbid, like physical abuse or sexual abuse, or just anything that is, terrorizing to another person, be it another adult or a younger person, somebody younger than them, but like a boss who's a narcissist, who's abusing power. Abusing power is one of the big things that narcissists do because they feel powerless. But they can really fool people into thinking that they actually feel very invincible, because they have this need to present themselves as invincible. And that's just due to how powerless they feel. And they say that narcissism is born out of trauma. And in some cases, if let's say it's continual abuse and the child is really self-focused, because they have to be in order to sometimes even stay alive, they have to really do everything they can to keep themselves safe. That can lead to excessive self-focus that carries on into adulthood. And, that may be where the adult always engages in relationships. They're just kind of they're always scheming. There's always this agenda. And it could be because they're trying to gain the upper hand. But in some cases, it's like one traumatic event, like the death of their parent, or maybe that they were subject to some kind of a violent assault. And it didn't happen over and over again. It was just one thing, but it was enough to shatter their sense of self, because these are people that can be empty shells, and they're really looking to other people to kind of feel things I mean, and it's really not that they're feeling it. They're pretending to feel things. That's why sometimes you'll have in romantic relationships, these people will mimic what the perfect lover, the perfect partner would be like, but it's all a false front. You know, if you hear these horror stories about people who get involved with someone who totally like fooled them into thinking that they were so nice, so good, and then as soon as they get married or they move in together or they're just like they let down their guard, that person moves in and they, you know, just piece by piece destroy that person's sense of self. So the same can happen with parent to child. It can be it can feel like in retrospect that it was kind of a subtle thing where they were doing this and they were doing that, like kind of causing you to doubt yourself, causing you to feel emotionally dependent on them. Triangulation is when a narcissist goes from one person to another and talks bad about another person so that those two people, whether it's in a family or in a group of friends or in the workplace, you could have like if the coworkers or a boss is, you know, gossiping or speaking ill of another person in the workplace, and then everybody's fighting amongst themselves, but the narcissist is sitting pretty because they're the only one that nobody's, you know, bad talking, but they're talking bad about everybody else behind everyone else's back. A narcissistic water sign parent could easily do this. Now, you could have triangulation with any sign, any element. With water signs, there is the particular need to have this allegiance where everybody loves them and hates each other. The water sign narcissist can be especially needy of emotional loyalty. Of course, they're not giving it, but they want it. They may feel very emotionally empty, these people. And with the covert narcissist, it's not going to be the same thing. I'm going to talk about that separately. Right now, I'm talking about the one that's more malignant or more, you know, creating the negativity, generating negativity, causing negativity. I'd like to say consciously, but sometimes they just are doing this as a survival tactic, perhaps themselves, and they don't even, it's just so deeply ingrained in them that it's not even something that they think twice about doing. It's like an automatic thing. But it probably is calculated for sure. This can wreak havoc in families. You might have the water sign narcissist who, this is very commonplace with their children. They create sibling rivalry. They favor one child over the other. They pour affection on one. They withhold it to another or maybe multiple children. And if you are not the golden child, that can really cause a loss of self-esteem because you can feel that you always are comparing yourself to other people in life. Because maybe they compared you, but even if they don't specifically say, you know, why can't you be like your brother or sister, they still may favor that sibling, and you know that they think more highly of that sibling, and that is super painful. I want to bring in the covert narcissist because I think this is very common. This is a very commonplace thing with water signs, and it can be very hard to detect it and hard to break away from it. So the covert narcissist is the one who acts like they are the victim in life. So you have a parent who is, long suffering, they call it. And they're always sighing, or they always have some tale of woe. Something bad always happens to them. And if you grow up with this, you may really think when you're young, oh, my poor mother or my poor father. Usually we're going to talk about the mother only because the mother tends to be the one that's with the child the most. So I'm just going to use that because it's kind of almost like a cliche stereotype. But it's like the other reason I want to bring up the mother is because let's say that the father dies while the child is underage, and this covert narc could, I'm not saying like anybody who has a spouse that dies and has to raise children alone. I'm not like just dismissing that. That's a horrible situation to have to deal with, and traumatic situation. But some mothers will turn to their sons, especially if the son is the oldest one, and almost like, and this can happen if the father abandons the family, they get divorced, whatever. She turns to the son and kind of makes him into her surrogate husband, which can be really effing with the child's mind. You'll have males out here who are heterosexual males who, want to deal with women as adults, and they may have a really hard time trusting women because their mother, it's like emotional incest, really. And the mother may still, kind of like treat the son as like this, whatchamacallit, like I said before, a surrogate husband, and confide in her son. Talk to him, maybe parentify him if he's young enough. And the problem with this, in addition to the obvious boundaries that are being crossed with telling your personal business to your child, is that it makes the son feel guilty for wanting to date, for wanting to do his own thing, or even go off to college because his poor mother is sitting home alone. And, some of these narcissistic types of women will, really play it up because she doesn't want to be alone. And she does want some kind of attention to that level. So whether it is that specific situation or any kind of situation where the mother is afraid of losing the child, there are many ways in which this happens. And one of them I'm going to talk more about with the earth signs, because they tend to do this, I think, the most, is use money. Narcissists in general use money as a way to control people. So with children, a parent who rewards children for kind of towing the line sets up that child to not be hungry enough to try to earn it on their own. And that is really a form of keeping the child dependent. And we're not talking about a parent who gives money to their child here and there. As a matter of fact, if the child is underage, it makes sense to give an allowance, but the child may have to do certain chores in order to qualify for an allowance. But even beyond an allowance, if there are special purchases or even as an adult, I don't think it's wrong for the parent to give an adult child money. The problem is when it's all that's happening and the teenager, when the child gets to be a teenager and they never have their own job or anything like that, that could be very incapacitating because they could get addicted to receiving money for not doing anything, and it becomes a way of life, and it's very hard if you've been that's what we would call spoiled. Of course, I don't really believe in anybody being spoiled. I think that in this case, it's being thwarted from actually being more of an adult, and that it's actually a really bad thing to do this to children. But these types of people, they don't care because they're not really looking out for the child. They're looking out for themselves. And they're trying to meet their emotional needs first and foremost. So what I'm trying to say with water signs is however they are behaving with their child, their first priority is their own emotional well-being or fulfillment. So whatever that takes, if they can guilt their child into compliance, then so be it, even though that may create a lot of conflict within the child, like not knowing whether it is right or wrong to want to do something or not want to do something. The parent, and I'm talking about developmentally appropriate things. It's developmentally appropriate to give your child more and more freedom as they enter adolescence and advance in it. And obviously, if a parent is too lax and they're giving their child premature freedom, that can be injurious to a child because they may not feel like they are being properly nurtured. They may feel like they're maybe on one level they may like it because they feel like, oh, I have all this freedom and none of my friends do and I'm so cool. But I think deep down inside, they're going to feel as if they're basically not being cared for. But there's another end of the spectrum, another extreme. You can either be neglected or you can be smothered. And so water sign parents who are narcissists tend to smother their children. Also, the covert narcissist can guilt their children into thinking that, convincing their children that they have to be their caretakers. Now, I realize that there are some parents who are disabled, and maybe it is true that some children from an early age learn how to push a wheelchair for a disabled parent or to help out within the home at a deeper level, at a more intense level than their average peer, because they happen to be in a family like that. And that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, that might be an unfortunate situation where the child kind of loses their childhood in a lot of ways. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And some people might not have the money to afford a private nurse, and they do rely on their family to help them to function, including their children, helping them. But what I'm talking about is the parent who is in a position where they are relying too much on their child. And I feel that they might be using their situation to get their child to give them undivided attention or what have you, or not to leave them or to spend time with friends as much because the parent wants that attention. And it's a very hard one with that because there might be some kind of disability that the person is experiencing, or some reason why they can't work, or they can only work a little bit, and maybe they do need help. But the problem is when someone assumes somebody is supposed to be there and take care of them, that is problematic. Especially if the adult becomes very demanding. Although somebody who's a covert narc is more likely to be very, almost like cloyingly sweet, trying to kind of appeal to the child in a way that makes them feel like they are tied to them. And there may be some cases where the person who has this parent who might be disabled, for instance, where they do feel a strong desire to help or a strong duty to help. And I don't think that's necessarily so bad, but the problem is when there is this obvious abuse or other circumstance that makes a child feel like they have to continue to be a nursemaid to a parent. And this can be a situation like, let's say a child grows up with a parent who is disabled in some way, maybe has limited mobility, and the child has to do the shopping, whatever. And for some reason, there are no other family members that are helping out. Even when you have multiple siblings, sometimes there's only one sibling who really takes that responsibility and the caretaking role, but maybe they want to go off to college, and the parent may be, saying, but what's going to happen to me? What's going to become of me? I need somebody to take care of me. And the child feels really torn. And they're really, I'm talking about somebody who's going off to college, so they may be 18 and not technically a child anymore. And they're like, should I sacrifice my future for this parent? And it could be really a sticky situation because you may be counting the days till you can leave because of the type of environment you were in. And then you're being told that this parent needs you there for some reason, whether it's for them, whether it's for your younger siblings that the parent can't take care of. So there are so many other ways that this can play out where the parent is lonely or they are envious in some cases that their child is able to, this may seem outlandish to some people, but some mothers may be jealous of their daughters or envious of their daughters. And if their daughters are dating and, seem to attract the opposite sex, and the mother, she feels like she hasn't had a date in ages, she may look to her daughter as receiving more affection than she's getting and be competitive that way. And in some places, the competition can be really gross, where you have a woman who is already maybe even middle-aged trying to seem younger, trying to appeal to people who are much younger than her so that she can seem like the queen bee, because that's part of narcissism too, is having to be, you know, the center of everybody's universe. And so, but then the emotional side of it comes into being a water sign. So usually it's going to be about having that emotional connection that is very consistent and maybe very frequent. Like if you live in different states or countries, that you're still communicating quite a bit. And maybe that doesn't sit well with you because you're finding it hard to break free from all of that. Even if you were okay with it in your 20s or something like that, maybe you're starting to get more independent. And this is part of what can trigger a water sign narc, is when the other person starts to kind of distance themselves. Because the water sign is really emotional as it is somebody who could be possibly very, even like very sentimental, even something that is very positive. And it makes them hard to let go because they feel like this is such an important bond or what have you. So it can be this self-defeating pattern with some of these narcissists that they don't even see in themselves. I think I'm going to stop it here because I said what I really wanted to say. So I hope that you enjoyed this. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.